Finding the right people. I found my chef at a party when I was really drunk. I was mentally in a different time zone. I'd just flown back home from New York, so I was still on Eastern Time, wildly out of whack with Greenwich Mean Time, and my eyes were rolling out of my head. My friend, Tom Gordon, who had heard about the project, introduced me to his friend, Joe, and he just got it. We all clicked, stayed up until 6 in the morning. Easy for me, as my body was wired into that time, for them not so much, and vowed to get in touch the day after. There, on New York time and 8 or 9 beers down, I was convinced I had found my man. But here's the thing, as well as phone calls to the restaurant from customers, I'd started to get businesses getting in touch with the shed too. I suppose this is the great con. The thing that made me realize bullshit is universal in every business you're in. Seeing me at the top of the TripAdvisor rankings had led to PR companies wanting to represent me, ingredient stockists contacting me trying to get their wares placed in my restaurant. I got sent a box of loose leaf tea that I'm still working my way through, because who uses loose leaf tea? Come on, mate, send me tea bags and then we can talk. And chefs and waitstaff speculatively sending me their resumes hoping to work with or for me. Thus, I came upon my first big compromise of the whole escapade. When I first decided to turn this idea from a big joke into a slightly bigger, but more real joke, I was convinced that I would hire a chef and also waiters from these people who had emailed me their resumes. That, in my initial thinking, was the funniest and best way to do this. To hire an actual chef who had applied for an actual job at my shed, pair them up with actual waitstaff who needed an evening's work, and go from there. I'd already sifted through a few resumes and even had a phone interview with a very sweet lady who promised to cook up 3-course Malaysian cuisine. Meeting Joe, woozily drunk and on the wrong time zone, was a random, off-plan deviation. It wasn't part of my original vision, but for it to work, it had to be him. For one, he'd had a peep behind the curtain of my wild idea, and he liked what he saw. He understood what I was doing and why, and he thought it was funny too. He was willing to give up a couple of days of his time. Joe is an actual chef who plates and serves in a fancy London restaurant in the West End to help my cause. I knew he'd do the job properly. We can take 2 vision-centric lessons from this. It's important to have people who see your vision on your team. Prioritizing doing the job right rather than doing it by my original vision turned out to be the best decision I made. On the night of, Joe was amazing. He made the kitchen his own domain, kept the food, which, let's face it, is the whole essence of the experience, pumping out of the kitchen. And honestly, I've been to real restaurants where I've had to wait longer for my food. He was the right person for the job because he took food service by the scruff of the neck and made it his own. I needed someone who knew what they were doing and got why we were doing it. And I found one, though it would have been funny as part of my wider plan to have the Malaysian cuisine cooked by a stranger who thought she'd been hired by a real restaurant. Getting Joe to do some frozen pasta bakes in the oven turned out to be the better decision on the night. I had to learn to reprioritize my focus when the situation called for it. TOOLKIT. Tempted as I am to say get exceedingly drunk 3 hours after an 8-hour transatlantic flight and hire the first person who says hello to you. That's not exactly the most practical advice, especially if the 2-day hangover that succeeded it was anything to go by. Take stock of everyone you know. Do they have skills that can help you make your idea a reality? Do they have areas of expertise that you can't possibly hope to learn in the time needed to do it? Take stock also of who they know. My friend Tom is an arts editor who knows practically everyone, and I think you have a friend like this too. Everyone does. Someone who seems to attract experts in their fields into their friend group. I suppose the short version of this is network. Network. Similar to getting your idea in front of people and getting your friends. colleagues, acquaintances, and enemies on board with what you're doing. Don't be afraid to recruit geniuses, experts, and hard workers from your immediate friendship circle or the circle beyond that. The people you need to make your bullshit work are within touching distance of you right now. You just have to reach out to them. Get your bullshit together. At this point, I had the following things: a hangover, a chef, a sort of plan, a waitress, my friend, Phoebe, an actress with waiting experience who, like Joe, completely understood what we were doing, a shed. I also had a demand for my service, the #1 rated restaurant in London, a box of tea I didn't know what to do with, and I knew I needed lights, seats, tables, atmosphere, ingredients, plates. But do you know what I didn't have? Any clue how I was going to make this work? It's natural to have a wobble in the run-up to the launch of your big idea. In fact, it's arguable that I lived in a state of perpetual wobble in the 6-week run-up to it. So far, a lot of our focus has been on taking stock of where we are. And what we're doing where we are is at the bottom. Where we want to get is to the top. Realizing that you're in a place you want to move up from can go one of two ways. It can be the motivator that makes you realize you really need to kick your ass into gear. I don't want to wash my clothes with a washing machine full of shit anymore. Or it can be the thing that completely ruins you and makes you feel like you're not worthy of the success you're aiming for. Who am I kidding? I'm just an idiot with a washing machine full of turds and sewage. But I'm here to tell you something I realized while preparing for the shed, and the one motivator that has been at the core of my successes ever since. Fear of failure is a powerful energy. Use it. There's a central idea to everything I do, but I had to have my pre-shed wobble to fully understand, identify, and recognize it. From deciding to make the shed a restaurant reality to the night of the actual launch, I had about 6 weeks. In that time, I almost quit a number of times. There were multiple voices of doubt, both in my head. I think doubting whether you can open a restaurant in the shed you live in without any prior restaurant experience is, perversely, a sign of sanity. If I didn't question that, I would be worried. And from the people around me, friends, co-workers, my girlfriend, my family, everyone in turn took their chance to quietly sit me down, look me in the eye with furrowed, knotted eyebrows, and go, "Hey, buddy, you sure about this? You sure about this, bud?" And in truth, the answer was no. I worried whether the food would work, whether the bookings would dry up, whether I could ever convincingly make my shed and the surrounding garden look like a rustic, pop-up restaurant experience. I worried that the first guest would turn up, take one look, say, "This is a joke, right?" Then turn heel and go. I worried that all the work, by now months worth of it, would have been for nothing. Did I worry whether this was stupid? A little, yes, but I mainly worried that, if I didn't do stupid right, I'd have nothing to show for it in the end. At this point, I want to introduce you to the most powerful idea in the book, and possibly in life. The only way to make your idea work is to stop caring about your idea. You have to treat your idea a little like a Tinder shag. Exciting, intense, pure focus at the start, some middling to decent foreplay in the middle, then complete detachment and ghosting after you've bought it breakfast. I'll show you what I mean. Here's your 2-step plan. Have an idea that really excites you and, crucially, passes the bullshit cortex. Be pragmatic enough to treat that idea with complete disrespect. I know this is weird, but it's truly the genius at the center of all of this. Your idea, when you first have it, is your precious baby son. You want to protect it at all costs. I understand that. You worry whether it has enough food, light, love, and air, but you are also, in doing all this worrying, suffocating it. You cannot see a flaw in your own genius because you are too close to it to see its flaws. You're trying to paint the Mona Lisa with your nose to the canvas, and what you need is controlled distance, a cool air of detachment that allows you to see your idea fully for what it is. You need to be able to love it, then hate it. You need to be able to see it through other people's eyes. Other people's criticisms are often valid. You just need to see them for yourself. At a crucial point in the run-up to the shed, I made an informed decision to detach myself from it and treat the idea with contempt. Recruiting Joe and letting go of one of the key expectations of my idea as I did so was a key part of that. Recruiting Joe taught me to be flexible and bend around the hurdles in front of me rather than be defeated by them, and it let me zoom out from my idea and treat it pragmatically. If I failed, I would only fail because of the limits I had set myself, and I think that is the one true underlying reason for all the success that came with it. Being able to see it for the joke that it was and treat it as such. Suddenly, the shed wasn't the everything in my life. I was able to make cool, detached decisions without stressing over every minor detail. Approaching my idea like it was someone else's idea I was helping with allowed me to see the flaws, the upcoming difficulties, the things that wouldn't work and the things that would. I was able to get a 360-degree view on the whole thing from the safe, cozy vantage point of my own strange head. TOOLKIT. So how do you stop, caring about an idea you've tried so hard to bring to fruition up until this exact moment? It's not easy, and this is the most difficult step of the entire process, but it's the one that offers the greatest reward. So take note, you have to trust the vision. I'll tell you how I do it, but keep in mind that for you, not all of these steps will necessarily make sense. So feel free to cherry pick from the list below and see which techniques work for you. Remember that there is no hard and fast way to stop caring. This section also works for people who have just had breakups, adventures, and being a bullshitter. I think it's fair to say you bullshit a lot. You purchase this book. That's indicative of a trend in behavior. Sometimes you don't know you're doing it, but you are, constantly. Nobody is above bullshit. If you really want to get down to it, bullshitting is hardwired into the very nature of human psychology. Taking that small nub of you that lives inside your head, that you know so well, and projecting it outwards, shooting it onto other people with a cloud of confidence and thin air and projection. That's bullshit. Every time you express the soul of yourself in any way outside of you through your mouth, you're technically bullshitting a little. Just letting people know you're there by making some noise about it. Don't be afraid of being a bullshitter. It's happening all the time. The first time I bullshit, it was a wild success. I was 5 years old. My family was taking a beach day, and our dad handed us all a shiny 1-pound coin to go and buy a toy to play with for the day. I impulsively bought a sort of ray gun thing, a tiny plastic pistol that made electric whirring sounds when you pulled the trigger. You know the ones. You had one as a kid as well. It was alright. My cousin, however, went to the shop 20 minutes after us, and while she was there she managed to find a far greater prize, a plastic bow and arrow set that could actually shoot. And maybe I am hyping it up with my nostalgia, but the bow was as big as she was and the arrow could fire for approximately 100 million miles. I absolutely had to have it, but I had already spent my toy money. "Dad," I moaned, "Dad, can I have another pound to buy a bow and arrow set?" And he said, "No, I want to make it clear that I have, with difficulty and a therapist's help, forgiven my father for his cheapness." But at the time I was furious. The oral history of this incident is hard to fact check, but among my brothers it's pretty unanimously agreed upon that I went missing not long after this. I was from a large family, one of 6 siblings, so it was easy to slip away from the pack and go off and do your own thing. After a while, there was some mild parental concern about my whereabout. "Where's Oobah?" That turned to a bigger group effort to find me, right? Your brother's missing. Everyone go spend 5 minutes trying to find him, until, at the top of the beach, on the base of the promenade up to the shops and the parking garage standing above it, they found me, smirking and pale and topless, hands held neatly behind my back. I was selling a seashell to a grown man for 20 pounds. What had happened in the minute since I disappeared was this. With a sandcastle bucket in hand, I had scoured the beach for treasures. A shiny pebble here, an interesting looking shell there, a couple of tiny crabs dipped up out of a rock pool, and arranged them on my beach towel in the form of a shop front. Then, with great showmanship and a whole lot of formative bullshit, I started selling to passersby. Would you buy an interesting shell from a 26-year-old man? You would not. But back then, when I was just a cute, entrepreneurial little boy, the plan worked. Armed with my youth, my charm, and my towel full of treasure, I managed to sell trinkets and sea gems and raised enough for one bow, an arrow, and an ice cream. The whole walk back to the car, my brothers covered in sea slime and sand, me eating an ice cream and firing an arrow into the sun, I beamed like the smug little goblin I was. This was my first taste of bullshit, and I instantly craved more. When I was 15, me and a couple of my brothers were in a band. Obviously, nobody takes a band full of dish-faced teenage boys particularly seriously, so it was hard to secure any kind of paying gig anywhere in the surrounding area. We tended to play annual Battle of the Band shows and the occasional pub that turns a blind eye to underage drinkers open mic night. That's until I came up with the bright idea of hiring Martin Davey. Martin Davey was a gravel-voiced middle-aged Cockney band manager with a wealth of experience bringing local bands to the top and the gift of the gab to prove it. He also was just me on the phone, pretending to be an old Cockney band manager, calling up venues and fronting to them as if our band was good. And it worked. Not every time, but most. Realizing that venues took bands more seriously when they had representation, I got us representation. It just also happened to be me doing a voice after watching one too many Guy Ritchie films. This went well for a few months. We booked the kind of gigs that, sure, weren't going to have stadium rock bands shaking in their boots, but put us a couple of strides ahead of similar bands in our local scene. Then we made it to Madhouse, a big practice and rehearsal space in Birmingham, and that's where the scheme started to fall apart. Turned out the venue was run in a kind of backwards way where all the bands appearing there had to pay a compulsory fee to play to cover the usual cost of putting a gig on, stuff like security and staff and the hiring of the venue. I didn't understand that because I was 15 and an idiot, and when my band and I turned up we were shell-shocked that the venue's staff immediately asked where Martin Davey was. He was supposed to pay us ahead of schedule. They said, "You can't play without it." I just shrugged indifference while they desperately called the mobile phone that was buzzing in my jorts pocket. "We just work with him," I said innocently. "We don't know where he is." In the end, we played, smashed it according to the 6 to 8 fans of ours who came to see our segment of the show anyway. And after the show, the desperate venue staff ended up apologizing to us for all the confusion. "And here's a band now," the announcer said as we made it up onto the stage. "They've had a difficult night so far, and I'm so sorry your managers let you down." Boys, give them a big round of applause. It's the meat. Once again, bullshit won out. As my teen years progressed, I started to put a lid on these silly bullshit schemes of mine. That was due to a mix of things. There were voices of doubt around me, an internal nagging need to be seen as mature, the idea that abandoning such folly was a grown-up thing to do. I plodded from my teens to early adulthood largely bullshit-free, and then I found myself in the rut I described earlier. You know, living in a shed, stagnant career, strange-smelling clothes. I was working for someone else doing work I didn't believe in and didn't feel anything for. I was making just about enough to get by but nowhere near enough to live comfortably. Bills were piling up, stresses and debts were piling up. I was, as I have detailed at length, living in a shed. And then I met Giorgio Peviani, and my faith in bullshit was restored to me.